like to call to order the West Orange Board of Education meeting for August 6, 2018, right here at West Orange High School. Mr. Calavano, please.
Roll call, Mr. Alper?
Here.
Mr. Charles?
Here.
Mrs. Mordecai?
Here.
Mr. Robertson?
Here.
Mr. Schwartzbaum?
Here.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Notice of meeting. Please take notice that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided in the following manner. That a written notice was sent from the Office of the Secretary of the Board at 4 p.m. on January 9, 2018. That said notice was sent by regular mail to the West Orange Township Clerk and the editors of the West Orange Chronicle and the Star Ledger. That said notice was posted in the lobby of the Administration Building of the Board of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Calavano. Before we start the superintendent's report, I'd like to observe a moment of silence in honor of the passing of Ms. DiGiovanni, Ms. Foster, and student Henry Chang. Thank you. Before we get to the superintendent's report, once again, we're going to pull item number 6 under finance on page 8 of the agenda for those following along. Number 6 is pulled from the agenda for tonight. Okay, Mr. Rutsky, if we can start with these. Oh, wait, let me back up first. I need a consideration for the closed of public meeting minutes of July 16, 2018. Any motion?
I'll move.
A second? Mr. Calavano?
Mr. Alper?
Yes.
Mrs. Mordecai?
I'll abstain.
Mrs. Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
Vice President Robertson?
Yes.
President Charles?
Yes. Okay, now, the superintendent's report.
Okay, a very quick report. Just a couple updates. Number one, we did the water testing for the Legionnaire's disease over at Redwood. When that information and report comes back, we'll certainly make that available for anybody who would like to see it. The other is the update on the turf field and the track. The turf field is done. It is absolutely beautiful. I want to thank those individuals that helped organize that, and certainly the town officials that helped us put it together. The track will begin on Wednesday. The work on the track, they indicated it will take 11 days for that to happen, and we should be in good shape for the opening night of our first football game, so we'll be good there. The other thing I just want to go through is we have one case of an HIB that I just want to share with you as a board. This happened during the ESY program, just so you're aware.
Okay, any questions from the comments from the board on the HIB report? Okay.
All right, one last thing. If you look at the website, you'll see a pop-up come up for the middle school and high school schedules for the students. Parents can go on and see their students' schedule, see their child's schedule. If there's anything that needed help with, please reach out to the schools, and the personnel will help if there's any issues whatsoever. The mailing for the elementary schools will be going out on Friday, August 24th. It will leave central office on that day, so it'll take a couple of days to get out to the parents. That will be the teacher assignment for the student, et cetera, and information that the principals will be sending out. That's all I have, Mr. Charles.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rutsky. Next on the agenda is questions from the public on agenda items. Please come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. These are just questions on the agenda items only. You have 3 minutes to speak. Mr. Calavano will work the clock.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jennifer Tunnicliffe. I live at 8 Hartshorn Terrace, and all of you should have received a letter from me this week about my displeasure about the $3 million of the additional state aid being returned to the homeowners. There were a couple things that I had issue with. One was the way it sort of took place, that it was announced prior to the vote tonight. I understand the reason for that is having to do with the tax mailing to the township residents. However, I feel like it breeds a lack of trust in the board when we see things that happen outside of a regular meeting and before a vote's being taken. Secondly, there's many of us who feel the impact of this to the homeowner isn't as great as it could be if we left the money in the school district. So I'm asking all of you to reconsider your vote and to leave that $3 million, the full $3.5 million, in the budget for this year. I know if I asked any of our principals if we had a wish list, they would have a huge list to give to us. So I'm asking you to consider that. And the other questions I have are sort of what the thought process was behind giving this back to the homeowners rather than leaving it where it is, where I think a lot of us agree that that has a greater impact on our district than it would on the $91.24 on the taxpayers. And also, is there a mechanism for the board to vote privately, and I'm hoping you'll educate me in this area, before the vote is actually taken publicly? I think there were some concerns from the public around that. And finally, as we look to hopefully get greater state aid as the years go on, are there certain priorities that are publicly listed for the district of what that money will be used for? How much of it is going to go back to the taxpayers? How much of it will be used for, upgrading capital projects, other things like that? So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. Terry Trigg Scales, 85 Clarkin Drive. I'd like to echo the comment of the previous speaker. I left, I think it was the last board meeting, very excited about the $3.5 million that was coming back to the district and just imagining all the wonderful things that could happen. We need to implement the Amistad curriculum. There's a program called Restorative Justice. There are various programs that I'm sure could have enhanced the quality and the service of instruction, delivery of instruction to our students. And so I was really disheartened to see that we were going to divide it up into the very small parcels. And I was trying to imagine what $91 would do for a family of four. You can probably get 2 tanks of gas, maybe a couple of outfits for back to school, a dent in your grocery bill. But what we could have done for the school district could have a very long-lasting effect on what we could do for the students. So I just ask you to reconsider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just before you hit that, I just wanted a moment with Council, just for 1 second, just to clarify something. Council, the executive sessions that are on the agenda don't specify why they're being closed. It gives a general personnel, legal, and miscellaneous confidential matters. That's what they write in every agenda, and I don't know that that comports with what the law requires. As I understand the law, you need to specify what's going to be discussed. You need to specify how long it will take. And you need to specify when the minutes will become available for the public. I think that's what McGovern holds. I don't know if you believe differently, but as I look back in all of the agendas for West Orange Board of Education, we get this standard language that I don't think complies with the law. I'm raising this because I'd like to know in either executive session if the board is going to hear from counsel retained to do the investigation that, so if that's going to happen tonight, I think the public is entitled to know, since the investigation was initiated because of the public, and I don't think you satisfy the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act or McGovern, which I think holds on exactly this issue, if you do not specify and you do not tell us when we're going to be able to receive the minutes. So I just wanted to raise that
Yeah.
before we got into my comments.
The Open Public Meeting Act does specify that where you have attorney-client privileged information
Of course,
and you have personnel information.
of course.
Of course, the attorney-client privilege extends to the matters that we discuss in closed session, and they cannot be disclosed. Similarly, the matters involving personnel and any kind of personnel matter is appropriately in closed session. In fact, the law, as I read it, does require the board to discuss those in closed session, and the public is precluded from access to that discussion, to those discussions and those minutes.
So I don't disagree with you. I agree with you that when there's a personnel issue, and I agree with you that when there's something that requires attorney-client privilege, that there needs to be a closed session to discuss that. What I'm suggesting is that in the event that a rendering of results for an investigation that the public initiated, right? The public brought it to the attention of this board about inappropriate actions of the superintendent, and if that investigation is a result of what the public raised, the public is entitled to know the findings of that investigation. Are you familiar with McGovern?
I am.
Okay, so McGovern specifically identifies that you can't just blanket write what you're going to discuss in executive session. You have to specify so that the public knows why you're closing, and then you have to specify when the minutes are going to become available. I cannot find any executive session minutes available to the public for as far back as I can check today. So
Well, the minutes are not available because they are matters that touch on the attorney-client privilege, and they touch on matters involving personnel, which the Open Public Meetings Act specifically talks about privacy, protecting the privacy of individuals that the board is discussing.
we don't disagree. I don't want to belabor the issue because I
Right.
know you want to get through the meeting. Just if you'll permit me, McGovern specifically addresses this. So if you're familiar with McGovern, you know that it says you can't just say personnel issues. You can't just say attorney-client issues. You can't just say legal matters, and you can't just say miscellaneous confidential matters. You have to specify why you're closing, and then you have to make the minutes available, redacted as necessary to maintain the privacy. You do not do that here. You do not comply with the expectation. The whole point of McGovern was to clarify that these meetings are supposed to be open to the public, and that in very limited exceptions should you close the meeting to the public. Clearly, the public is interested in what's going on with Mr. Rutsky, his misrepresentation, and his lies. So if you have an interest that comes to the point where you bring it to the board's attention, and the whole reason why there was an investigation, I'm assuming your office wrote that statement for the board that said because of the defaming.
Ms. Bennett, can we get to your question, please?
Well, the point, we can get to the question, but the preliminary matter, I can't ask you a question if I don't know what you're closing your executive sessions for. And I'm of the impression that you're closing your executive sessions, at least at some point, to receive information from the law firm that you retained to conduct the investigation.
Couple of things. First, we appreciate your question, and also understand that you're an attorney. We've allowed tremendous latitude. We didn't start the clock.
No.
We're probably about 6 minutes in.
Fair
So here's what I suggest. Here's what I suggest in respect of your question. Why don't we come back with a formal opinion? Because even in a matter of a personnel matter, we can't use anything but employee numbers. If there's student matters, which is another area that happens in closed, except when we're approving the budget for a student's education or services, it's done with a number. And the details of any discussion, especially if it's regards an attorney, is going to be guarded under attorney-client privilege. So Let's
Correct,
come back
correct.
to you.
No, no,
with-
I understand that.
Let's come back to
I-
you with an appropriate, with an official response, and let's see what it is we can exactly provide, if anything, beyond listing, a legal matter, personnel matter, whether it's employee numbers, whether it's student numbers, et cetera. We'll come back to you on it, and I hope you appreciate that we've allowed tremendous latitude.
Fair
we never
enough.
do, we don't normally do this.
A point of legal order
Yes.
should not, the point of legal order has nothing to do with my comment. The point of legal order, if you're not comporting with what the law requires of you, and
Right.
I'm bringing that to your attorney's attention to advise you in accord, he reads McGovern very differently than I read McGovern.
Understood, but
then-
we're not going to turn this into a court of law right now. Our attorney's responded. We'll come back with actually a written, formal response. And once again, because we have not even run the clock, something we never do.
As soon as you finish, start the clock.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to get to your question, too. I want to see what the question is as it relates to the agenda items.
Okay, Michaela
Appreciate
Bennett,
that.
35 Old Indian Road. I want to know if in your closed session, you intend to receive information from the firm that was retained to conduct the investigation on Mr. Rutsky and other issues that you brought to their attention. There's no attorney-client privilege that's enjoyed by a firm that's retained to investigate. Your attorney is the man sitting to your right, all the way to the right. He is the attorney for the board. And so my question of you is, if you intend, and I'm shooting in the dark right now, I'm fishing, if you intend to receive information regarding the investigation that you've hired CSG to conduct, why will you not permit the public to participate in hearing the investigation? Admittedly, at some point, it may turn into a personnel matter where admittedly you may need to receive legal advice from your counsel. But the results of an investigation that the public brought to your attention, that you initiated to deal with and address your concerns about what the public thought, up to and including defamation, which would mean that someone is basically lying, should be available to the public. It's the public who initiated it. You didn't think it was necessary to investigate. We brought that material to your attention back in March. You didn't initiate an investigation until June, until the fact that you knew that the Essex County Prosecutor's Office was involved, et cetera. So I'd like to know if that's your intention, if your intention is to close or you have closed already and heard information from the firm that was retained to provide you with an investigation. That's number one. Number two, as promised and as always, Mr. Rutsky, that one HIB report, I'm curious as to whether or not you conducted the investigation personally and whether the investigation had anything to do with a staff member of the Board of Ed. And lastly, I'd like to join in the sentiment that $3 million, you cannot write a letter telling the state of New Jersey that you need $3 million back into the budget because the budget is sorely underfunded, and then turn around and refund that money to the public. As unpopular as it may be with my neighbors and friends, I don't need the $90. The schools sorely do. The teachers deserve it, the students deserve it, our facilities deserve it. And so I join in the interest that you cannot, on one hand, pen a letter stating that we are underfunded, and then in the other hand, approve a refund to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Jeremiah Salinas, 7 Crystal Avenue. After having several discussions with neighbors and other West Orange residents regarding the tax relief refund, it is clear that everyone is a bit perplexed by this decision. Many agree with the relief for taxpayers. Many of them agree with some hesitations. Many disagree. But more importantly, many residents question the motive behind it. Could it have just been pure luck that the announcement came in on the same day as most of us received our tax bills? Maybe just luck, I guess. Well, I echo the concerns that have been brought up and how we could have invested the funds. I also question the message that we are sending, not just to our community, but the State Department of Education, the governor's office, our representatives at the state level, about the deficits in our budget, in our schools, in our district, and what impact this is going to have in the classrooms. You have stated at meetings that there are programs that have been flat funded for years, the special ed program being one of them. You have also stated that the reason why the district is not receiving its proper share is because it's going somewhere else. And that is why the taxpayers have to carry the burden. Well, now with the new formula in the state budget, we receive funds. What do you do is return it immediately to the residents, which is a good idea, only because you don't have an investment plan. What message are you sending the state regarding our underfunded district? What message are you sending our community? Do we need the state funding for the school or not? This new formula is supposed to be phased in over the next several years. Well, if we look at what has historically happened with the budgets at the state level, it's often they're not able to keep up financially with the initiatives and the programs. So what happens next budget? Will our taxes go up again? So returning what is going to be less than $8 a month per resident makes no sense. One resident actually said to me, it's ridiculous. The idea as if this money is going to make a great impact on my own personal financial status. It is as it seems that they are doing this to appease people, to make them go away and forget about the circus that they are running there. Another resident pointed out that this is the right thing to do because we pay so much into property taxes that anything back to the taxpayers helps. What message do you want the community to understand? No one really knows how or the reasons why this administration decided to take this action. The most eye-opening comment came from one of our senior citizens. I am glad they sent the money back because I don't trust them to do what is right with it. I haven't trusted them in years. After listening to their concerns and thinking about it, I have to agree with her. I don't trust this administration. I don't trust the elected officials to do what is necessary with these funds because you don't have a short-term plan or a long-term plan. The actions or inactions of this board have created such an eroding environment around our schools and our community that this atmosphere does not nurture a positive work environment for our community, for our teachers, for our support personnel, and most importantly, for over 7,000 students in our classrooms every day.
Mr. Salinas, your time's up.
$224 last year, $271 the year before,
Mr. Salinas, your time's up.
124, you know,
Thank you.
a couple
Thank
of
you
years
for your
ago.
question.
Figure it out.
Thank you.
Lee Sutton, 67 Stanford Avenue, president of the West Orange Council of PTAs. When I heard of the taxpayer give back, I asked myself what could be the reasoning. Was it a headline grab or a good PR move? If this was the purpose, it was very short-sighted. The naysayers won't be appeased. But that's neither here nor there. A vote was taken this weekend by the West Orange Council of PTA board, and we unanimously agreed that the money should stay with the school district. I can only speak for the board since we did not have time to reach all of our PTA members. But I can say that the ones we did reach all agreed that the money given to us from the state for education should stay where it will have the biggest impact, within our schools and for our students. There are many things we can use the money for, such as building upgrades, roofing, and electric systems. We could redo playground surfaces or buy new equipment. We could have a safety net for the next Hurricane Sandy, new programs and teacher training. We have 45% of our students on free or reduced lunch. They arrive needing things more affluent districts don't have to provide. We have more problems to overcome than Livingston or Maplewood, and they cost money. I feel that it's important that you hear from the volunteers of our school district, the PTA people who give freely their time and energy to improve the quality of our children's education. I also want to personally thank you all for serving on the BOE. I know it's thankless. In the past few months, you have all been dragged through the mud, but your contribution does not go unnoticed by those of us who work alongside you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone further? Seeing none, we'll close that section of the agenda. Okay, so, Mr. Rutsky, you wanted to jump in on the HIB question?
Yeah, no, nothing to do with the HIB question. I don't think there's anything else, Mr. Charles.
Okay. Comments from the board? Mr. Alpert?
Do you want to discuss the funding now or in discussion later during voting?
Let's move the discussion while we put the vote.
Okay, I'll hold then.
Okay. Is there any other? No?
Nope.
Okay. Ms. Mordecai?
No, I'll discuss it when it comes up with the motion.
Mr. Schwarzkopf? Discuss it. Mr. Robertson?
Just looking to see if there's anything else other than that. In regard to the funding, I'll discuss it later, at the point where we're going to vote.
Okay. And I will reserve my comments too for that section as well. Okay. I need a motion now to move section A, personnel, with the addendum.
I'll make a motion.
A second.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Calavano, let's vote.
Mr. Alper?
Yes.
Mrs. Mordecai?
Yes, except I'll abstain on Deborah Robinson on the addendum.
Mr. Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
Vice President Robertson?
Yes.
President Charles?
Yes. I need a motion to move section B, curriculum and instruction.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Any discussion from the board? Seeing none, Mr. Calavano, let's vote.
Mr. Alper?
Yes.
Mrs. Mordecai?
Yes.
Mrs. Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
Vice President Robertson?
Yes.
President Charles?
Yes. Next, I need a motion for section C, finance.
I'll make that motion.
I need a second.
Second.
Discussion.
Lots.
Okay, so first I want to thank Papora Locksmith for the donation of the key machine. And Mr. Calavano, can you explain a little bit to the public what number 4 is, the removal, recommended approval of the non-state aid going to Seton Hall, Prep, Golda Ock, and the Playhouse?
Each year, through our budget, we receive non-public funding for technology, nursing, textbooks, and security. It has to be used for the non-public schools. We don't get to use any of those funds. Any of those funds that are not used are returned to the state. You will see in the upcoming agendas that we will have technology and security purchases that the board will also have to approve for the non-public schools.
Any further discussion from the board?
Before we get to the tax.
Correct.
Item number 4. Item number 4. Can you explain what this tuition, who this tuition is from, and for what purpose, how these students come from various districts to our high school?
The tuition.
On page 6.
Six.
Item 4, it's
Yes, I have it.
tuition.
It's 3 students who are out of district, and they attend our one of our special ed programs. So they're tuition students to us, and you see the tuition cost and the aid that their district has to pay our district.
Okay, so in the case of the first student, 236124, we're receiving $29,546 in tuition, plus an additional $34,273 on the 1-to-1 aid?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, there are students. We supply the classroom, the teachers, and the aides. So
Okay.
yes, that's correct.
And transportation would be paid for by the sending district?
That's correct. Their district would pay for that.
Thank you.
And then again, we also, once the certified tuition rates come out, Like the other private schools come after us for the additional, we have the same right to go after the public schools to get the additional tuition if it's more than what we anticipated.
Okay. And I just one follow-up as far as the tuition costs, if we're taking into account the full cost of, I assume these are special ed students? Or I'm just assuming because they're coming from various districts that have high schools. So I would assume they're coming here for special ed. But that may be a bad assumption.
Yes, it could be both.
Okay.
It could be both.
Fine. Thank you.
I have a non-state aid question. Mr. Calvano, on number 12, the purchase of the 2 buses, on page 9, the purchase of the 2 buses were through the Hunterdon County Co-op. I guess that's something we belong to each year. So there was a little savings on that, I guess, by buying it through the co-op, right?
So the lease is through the Hunterdon County Ed Services Commission. The actual purchase, we're using the Ed Services Commission of New Jersey's cooperative numbers.
Okay.
So yes, there's a savings because they already did the bidding process for us, or for the entire state.
Okay. And have we have bought, purchased buses through this, the co-op before?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Alpert.
Sure. On the state aid additional $3 million. My general feeling on this, it's complicated. As a parent, I definitely agree, and as a PTA member, I definitely agree. You don't want to see money not be in the schools. As a board member, I feel a little bit differently. I feel we've been underfunded by the state, obviously, for virtually forever, but we've never let our kids go without because we've continually gone to the taxpayers for what we need. Whether it's one-to-one Chromebooks or anything else as part of the comprehensive program, we really have not forgone things for the most part. And with this year's budget already having been discussed and voted on months ago, I feel that it's really our responsibility to return as much as we can to the taxpayers this year. I know $90 for many households is nothing whatsoever. For others, I think it's a bit more significant, including many of our seniors. But I think really, for me, a lot of this is symbolic, and what I don't like the idea of months after the budget process saying, here's a pile of money, oh my gosh, what can we spend it on, and have it burning a hole through our pockets. I don't like that visual at all, and I don't think it's the right thing to do for the taxpayers of West Orange. So that's where I am on that.
This was, when we were told that we were getting additional funding, I really thought about it because last year we received $1.5 million in additional funding, and we gave back $500,000 and we kept the $1 million. And that was a tough decision. A lot of seniors came up to me. We have about 17% of our residents are senior citizens on fixed incomes. And a lot of them came up to me and said, why didn't you give us the whole thing back? And then when I explained that, things we had to do, roofs to fix, boilers and things like that, while some of that was in the budget, there were some other emergency items that we needed that for. And so we gave back $500,000. Now this year we got an additional $3.5 million after a lot of advocacy, and we decided, we discussed it. I decided that we should be able to give back quite a bit to the residents, because over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, we've continuously raised taxes 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%. And if you add in the town portion, it's a significant increase for most of our residents. So I thought about it, and I just want to add another comment. I believe Mr. Salinas said something about budgeting. Well, our short-term budgeting is our annual budget process. Our long-term budgeting is our 5-year strategic plan. I know you commented that we don't have a plan, short or long-term, but we do. So just wanted to respond to that. I feel that this year, this is something we should do, is return it to the taxpayers. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Schwarzbach, Mr. Schwarzbach.
One cannot look at the state increase to aid in a vacuum. We need to look at the numbers, what's in the budget. So first thing is that when we as a board vote on a budget, we make sure that everything is funded, all the programs that have been requested. If you look at this current year's budget, we increased total spending to $148.7 million, an increase of $5 million. So we increased it. In fact, if you look at the state aid in the budget that we approved prior to the $3.5 million, we had $10.4 million that we are receiving from the state. So we advocate for increase in aid from the state based upon the formula. So now we receive this. The way the board's budget is funded on an annual basis is primarily through taxpayers. So we received some incremental funds. What we did was we decided to give back the preponderance to the taxpayers. If in subsequent years we don't receive it, well, it doesn't impact anything because it was incremental funds. We didn't base our budget based upon having this amount of money in it. The other thing is you need to look at our finances. Again, so we have to look at it. This year, we have approximately $2.5 million in reserve, plus another $1.7 million. So all in all, and we will have approximately $5 million in reserve going into the next fiscal year. I know while many people say, oh, don't give it back to the taxpayers, $5 million is a lot of money to have in the budget for reserve. We as a town have an obligation to two constituencies to make sure that our children are educated and receive the best education, to which we are doing that, and our teachers are paid. We have a collective bargain agreement, and we comply with that. On the other hand, we have an obligation to try to make this town affordable from a tax basis. One of the biggest issues in our town is that we have a very high effective tax rate. In fact, one person got up and said, oh, I'm paying $34,000. So we have to be cognizant of that. If we don't try to decrease the increase in taxes, we will lose more and more citizens. So therefore, I feel that we voted correctly to give back the preponderance of this increase in state aid back to the taxpayers.
Mr. Robertson?
Okay. First, I do want to thank council PTAs and all the parents who got up and spoke. I've been you. Okay, I got here because I served on PTAs and PTA boards, and on that journey, I held the same view. I would have said the same thing. Once I got onto the board, and in going through board training and actually delving deep into the budgets, I then realized that we actually have, while we have priorities, the priorities included the taxpayer. Our first priority is always safety and security. Are we fulfilling that? Okay. The security audit fully funded. What changes may come out of that are not anticipated. We may have to go into reserve to fund those, but we have to fund safety and security first and foremost. High school air quality and HVAC issues, we've got to pay for that. Safety and security. The Gregory crumbling retaining wall, we still have to look at how to properly fund that. I mean Washington, not Gregory, I'm sorry. Gregory is an HVAC issue, but Washington's crumbling retaining wall, we have to look at how to properly fund that. So we have things that we need to make sure we're addressing, whether it's by dipping into reserve or by budgeting in advance. And we have things that come up as the year goes along that were not budgeted that we have to address. But we're addressing the safety and security. We'll continue to address that. Student achievement. Student achievement, we look at in certainly many respects, funding the bubble, which we'll talk about tonight, funding track and field. But when it comes to funding academics, we've fully funded all the programs that supervisors recommended to us, including next-gen science, the next generation science standards. Now, can we do better? Absolutely. Have we fully implemented the Amistad curriculum? No, and we need to. Have we fully implemented the curricula that we have for engineering and code, which we have for K through 8, but we've only really implemented it in Edison? We have a ways to go there, and we should look at how we do that. So we do have things that we need to do more of in student achievement, but the programs that were brought to us, we fully funded. And we increased the funding several $1 million every year, and in doing that also increased the taxes. Have we fully funded areas like, diversity and cross-cultural training that we've been talking about forever? No. We need to fund that. We need to look at that. So there are areas where we could do better in terms of the funding, but once again, the programs that the supervisors brought to us to fund, we made sure were fully funded. But we still can do better, and there are things that can enhance student achievement. Then we get to the third priority. Priority 1 was safety and security. Priority 2, student achievement. Then we get to a priority that we do have by law and ethically a fiscal responsibility for. And that's in fiscal governments. We have a responsibility to taxpayers. Now, I don't know how many of you have talked with our seniors or senior leaders. Our seniors they feel they're being taxed out of existence. They can't age in place. Now, will this little bit of money back solve that? No. But we have to be sensitive to the fact that not only can they not age in place, under the new federal tax law, they're getting hit even harder because they can't deduct all the property taxes. Number 2, there are some parents who have actually left here who had kids in the school. I have a friend who sold his house at a $100,000 loss because his taxes are going up $1,000 a year. Loved this town, lived here 29 years. His daughters were in our schools. One of his daughters is a friend of my daughter. He was deeply saddened and very upset that he had to sell his house and move, but he figured that he'd make the $100,000 back in about 5 or 6 years, moving to a town that unfortunately he felt had much less diversity, had still well-ranked schools, but he'd pay substantially less in taxes. Now, the tax burden isn't only ours, the things the town should be doing. That's an entirely different subject. But we do still have to attend to what's our responsibility. So what I've advocated for is trying to find balance. It's complicated. It's not a simple issue of, let's just put all the money back. We've continued to increase in funding our schools every year by several millions. So we had to think about at what point do we think about the taxpayer? At what point do we think about their responsibility? Once again, $91 doesn't do very much of anything. It's at most a gesture. It's a baby step in a direction. What I've advocated for is more of a 50-50 split. And last year we did 2/3 back in the schools, 1/3 to the taxpayers. Finding a balance is tough. I don't know that my answer is the right answer. I don't know that our answer is the right answer. I don't know that your answer is the right answer. It's difficult. And I'm glad as Ms. Sutton mentioned how tough it is being up here. The decisions aren't easy, and thank you for your appreciation. And you just made it less of a thankless job by giving that thanks. But it's tough, I'm still trying to recruit one person to run who hasn't run all these years, who has much wisdom. But it's a tough decision. And I'll ask that you look at it not just through a myopic, or I shouldn't say myopic, that's negative, inappropriate, but you shouldn't look at it just through one particular viewpoint. Try to look at that window picture and not just through one particular lens. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to mention, you're right, transparency. We do need better transparency. Our process was not as effective on this, and that's on all of us, including myself. And I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robson. My thoughts real quick before we get to the vote is, I think I agree with Mr. Schwartzman. When you look at the budget is the plan for the next school year for 18 and 19. All of the programs are fully funded, and there's a $5 million reserve. So I think that at this time, the prudent thing to do is to be fiscally responsible for the taxpayer in West Orange. You know, if this is next year, we're sitting here at 1920, my opinions may change because of programs may not be fully funded. But when you look at the budget this year that was adopted, all the programs are fully funded. We have a $5 million reserve. And I think now what the responsible thing to do is to take care of the taxpayer a little on this. So do I have any further comments from the board?
I would just say that as the 7-year plan to fix adjustment aid, assuming it does continue to phase as it's supposed to, and based on what our legislators tell us in the spring next year as we're preparing next year's budget, I think we'd be much more inclined to actually use a large portion of what we'd be assuming we'd be getting in the budget next year for additional programs, so that we could actually do it properly in the planning stage.
Well, and to Mr. Alper's point, maybe in our budget process, granted it's hard to plan for money that you don't have, but maybe we need to spend a moment more and look at if this, then that.
Sure.
What is it we're going to do? What is it that was underfunded? Well, for me, my hot button, code and engineering. But we do need to take a closer look at that and do better planning. And we also need to look at our overall strategic plan. That is, to Mrs. Mordecai's point, that's our 5-year view. So we do have a plan. We do have priorities. We need to re-examine those priorities annually and see what can we do a better job with and what can we do a better job with now. Thanks.
Okay.
Yep.
I just want to add one other thing to your point, Mr. Robertson. You may not know, or you may have forgotten. We do have diversity training. Our teachers again this year went for the Amistad training at Kane University. Okay.
We do have we have Amistad training at Kane.
Yes.
That is not diversity and cross-cultural training at the level. I'm in a diversity industry. That's part of my industry,
Okay.
right?
Well, we're a
we
part
do
of
not
the
do it
Kane
at the
Diversity
level that we
Council.
should for our teachers.
Okay.
We don't.
Well, we're a part of the Kane Diversity
do-
Council, and the
I
teachers go to
understand.
Kane for various diversity trainings.
We're on the right road, but we haven't traveled far enough.
Okay,
Okay.
so no further comment then, Mr. Calvano. Let's vote on finances, please.
Mr. Alper,
Yes.
Mrs. Mordecai,
Yes.
Mr. Schwartzbaum,
Yes.
Vice President Robertson,
Yes and everything except no on business 2.
President Charles.
Yes. Next item on the agenda is reports. Acceptance of the HIB report. Do I have a motion for that?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Second, Mr. Robertson. Mr. Calvano, any discussion on the board? Seeing none, Mr. Calvano, let's vote.
Mr. Alper,
Yes.
Mrs. Mordecai,
Yes.
Mr. Schwartzbaum,
Yes.
Vice President Robertson,
Yes.
President Charles.
Yes. Okay, next on the agenda is reports from the board members. Mr. Alpo, we'll start. Do you have anything?
Nothing really to report, although I would just point out that those new niche numbers came out, and I always view these, online, opinions on the best schools and whatever with a huge grain of salt, but it is interesting that we've gone from an A- to an A, and there's been a lot of upticks in some of the sub things they're judging. So it's nice to see some positive feedback out there over the summer while things are quiet.
Okay. Ms. Mordecai?
I have nothing, thanks.
Mr. Schwartzbaum?
Vacation time.
Good.
Mr. Robertson?
Just in brief, one of the things that we got a lot of feedback from parents on over the summer, and it's something that actually kind of impacted me as well, was the MAP testing results. A lot of parents do not understand, myself included, all the data inputs and analysis that is involved with that. And Ms. Mendez, I don't know if there's a way that we can do a much more in-depth presentation or maybe even groups at the various schools, similar to how we do a math night, to talk about the implications. I'll give a quick example. When a parent sees that a child, okay, my daughter started out in top 9% or top 8%, and then I saw her percentile rating, drop after that. And I was wondering, well, what was it? Is it that she was actually being tested on more difficult material? How does that factor in? Was she being tested at the same level or at a higher level? And that wasn't really explained. And to be able to understand the metrics and the numbers that support that, and then how that's applied. What does it mean for the child? What does it mean for our curriculum? Does it mean that the curriculum wasn't keeping pace? Or was it in fact the child's performance or the child being tested at a higher level? What does all that mean? And a lot of parents have a lot of questions. So if we could do something about that, it would be great, because that little, two-sheeter just doesn't say enough. That's it.
That's it. All right, thank you, Mr. Robertson. I have nothing to report at this time. You have something? Okay, the next board meeting will be held 8 p.m. on August 27, 2018, right here at West Orange High School. And next on the agenda is petitions and hearings from the citizens. Please come up to the microphone. You have 3 minutes to speak. Mr. Calavano will work the clock. Please state your name and address for the record. This is on anything you wish to speak to the administration or the board on.
Hello again. Terry Trickscales, 85 Clarkin Drive. I attended that wonderfully organized diversity fair that you had, the hiring fair. I stood there. I watched a number of applicants come in. I was so impressed with the organization. So I just wonder what happened. How many people were interviewed, how many were hired, what was the diversity of the new hirees. I just think it's important to get a follow-up on the fact that you had this fair. And again, I just want to commend whoever organized it, Mr. Rutsky and staff. It was very, very well done.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Jeremiah Salinas, 7 Crystal Ave. It was a $224 increment in the last budget. The year prior to that was $271. The year prior to that was $124. That's over $600 in 3 years. At a time when the median salary in New Jersey is not growing and families have to pay more to health insurance, and net pay is actually sliding backwards, what is going to happen the next year? Or the following years if the state does not follow its own rules, like some of you guys stated right now, correct? Are we going to get hit with the $90 plus more? Or are you going to dip into the $5 million budget that you have in reserve? So many people have been asking me this question. I have an answer for them. So there are many reasons that have inspired me to run for Board of Ed this November. I'm a public school teacher, a father of 2 children in our district, a senior at the high school, and a 2nd grader at Redwood. I have spent many years in education and understand the value it has in our community as a parent, a taxpayer, and as an educator. Too many people in West Orange are concerned about our schools. Across our community, our neighbors grapple with how the school district affects their home values, their kids' education, and the rising property taxes. Parents worry about the quality of education that their children are receiving. As a father, I want to be part of building the brightest possible future for my children and make sure that our community continues to be a place that attracts others to raise families of their own, just like it attracted my wife and I. Right now, we have many challenges, and we need to address these concerns. From a tax bill that makes up most of the school funding to the lack of serious infrastructure plans that do not address short-term or long-term goals. We continue to hear about problems, but we never hear any solutions, correct? We have to continue to meet these challenges head-on by being fiscally responsible while improving the quality of education in our schools. Our community deserves new leadership on the board, resident representatives who will actually listen and make tough decisions to move our district forward. We need to get back to a place where the concerns of our residents are heard and acted upon. We need to work together to move our community forward, regardless if you have school children in our school district. My mission now is to bring my experiences in public education, to bring a new kind of perspective to our district, leadership that knows the effects as a taxpayer, as a parent, and as an educator, with the willingness to listen and put the interest as a focus in continuing to build West Orange as a town that offers great opportunities for our families. With all the events surrounding our Board of Education, I believe it is important to stand up, offer my experiences and training in public education, and to benefit our community. one last thing, Mr. Roberson, I don't think you, as a board member, can publicly say that you're encouraging people to run for Board of Ed. Might be a violation of ethics. I would look into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salinas. Next.
Good evening with everybody. I'm Victor Garcia, 55 Washington Avenue. I'm the president of Washington Elementary School PTA. Right now, to be honest, I'm mad, okay, because I'm hearing that you guys have received $1.5 million. You have received $5 million in reserve. And so far, since I've been in the PTA of Washington School, which at the beginning of the last year, I talked with Mr. Ken Halper, I asked you, remember, I asked you to talk with the board to try to get a security guard in the mornings and the afternoon. Mr. Robertson, you said that the priority is the safety and the security of the school. Yes. My son got almost hit by a car last year. So if he would be hit, who should I blame? The Board of Ed? The teachers? The school? Who? Now, another thing. If you don't have anything to spend the $5 million that you have, come on, go to my school, check the bathrooms. My bathroom in my school, in Washington School, was flooded 2 times the past years. Once you go there, they only have 1 toilet. Rusty doors. Come on. You're letting kids of 7 years old kids, 6 years old kids go in those kind of bathrooms, in those kind of facilities. Come on. What's going on with you? I want to believe that you guys took the job because you wanted to help the kids. You wanted to do something different in the schools. I don't want to believe that you guys only took this job for the money. Please. Okay? I want to think because it passed a year and I haven't seen anything. They removed the trees from outside and they haven't done anything. There's holes on the outfield. Come on. I need a security guard in the morning, in the afternoon. I need my bathrooms to be renovated. Teachers tell me the same thing. They want their bathroom because they see teachers are the second parents of our kids. It's like you guys are letting our kids, my kids, going to this kind of facilities which they need to be upgraded. The bathroom, they stinks. It stinks. And I know because I've been the whole day doing book fairs, doing events in the school. And I know I've been in the school. For many days I've been in the school, every day, from 8:30 until 3:30. So please, from this new school year, I want you please to try and see my school and try to do something about it. Resolve the problem that it has. Please, I will thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Barry Geldseiler, 118 Old Indian Road. Got a few questions. Number one, John Calvano, when you found out about the alleged embezzlement or misappropriation of funds at Gregory, did you make the decision not to disclose it to the board, or did Mr. Rutsky tell you not to disclose it to the board? Mr. Rutsky, I got a question for you. I'm over here. I am, right here. I got a question for you. What were your reason to have lies, omissions, and misrepresentations on your super application, leaving off Kinnelon, leaving off a district in Ohio, and leaving off your DUI? Very interested in that. Ken Alper, I got a question for you. Okay, when I spoke to you before the vote, and I said to you that he worked at Kinnelon and you would look into it, you assured me you would, but you never did. How come you didn't do that? And also, last for you, Mr. Robertson, all right? I sent you documentation from Kinnelon on 2/25/18 that showed he was hired, then demoted 4 days later, and then resigned 6 months later. You told me you'd have an investigation. Now, why was CSG hired at the end of June after we publicly shamed you when we found out about the alleged embezzlement, right? You guys are all derelict to your duties, right? And it's an embarrassment. I'm telling you. Everybody, let's get out there and vote out the incumbents and drain this swamp. Thank you.
Anyone further? Seeing none, we'll close that portion of the agenda. Okay, yes.
The issue at Washington, we are aware, Mr. Mayo came and had a conversation with me about a security guard issue, and we are looking at solutions for that security guard. We agree that we need to tighten things up as far as traffic, whether it be vehicle, kids walking around on the road, in the parking lot, teachers coming in, etc. So we are looking at that. As far as bathroom flooding, there's not an elementary school that doesn't deal with this because of so many kids using the bathrooms, things happen. What's important is that we sanitize it properly, we clean it every day. So what I'd suggest is something, when you're in the buildings, please go to Mr. Mayo, have a conversation with her, write her an email, copy me so we know what's going on. We'll certainly address it with the head custodian, those working in the daytime, to make sure it's properly clean, as well as at night as well. I'm not aware of any holes in the ground from when trees are cut down, but we'll certainly take a look at that. And again, anything like that, any concerns you have, please make sure you share them with the principal first. Don't be afraid to copy other of us, like Mr. Calavano, myself, and then we can also look into it as well. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Rutsky, if we can add Hazel to that, I received a few emails about the bathrooms at Hazel as well, so we can take a look at that.
Let me address that as well. There was an issue that we had, and our directors of buildings and grounds went over, and they have a safe product that took the odor out of the bathroom. Again, we are aware of it. We had some old grout. There were some things in there, and you got to remember there's old bathrooms, and when you have an old bathroom in your house and it's not upkept, there's things that need to be done. So we're aware of it. We took care of it, and to my understanding, there is no odor whatsoever, but we'll stay on top of it. We'll keep checking it.
Was that work recently done? Or
It was done, and we had I got an email to the principal and myself from a parent at Hazel. We looked into it. I agreed there was an odor. I think it was the next day. It was sometime in the springtime that Mr. Ziggy went over and took care of the problem.
Okay. Now, the other thing on Hazel, I guess, in the same emails, is that there apparently was trees that were cut down, and there's stumps that are posing a hazard to the kid. I guess the kids are tripping over the stumps.
Okay.
So something we can work on as well?
We'll take a look at it.
Okay.
Absolutely. I do. I was asked of us to get the numbers together. We are going to have a presentation on the numbers for the Diversity Fair at the meeting on the 27th. And we're also, Mr. Mendez, you want to come up and just talk about the other thing you're going to update the public on the 27th, please?
Are you referring to Gifted? Yes. So for the 27th, we're looking at the impact of the changes to criteria for entrance into the Gifted program, which would include how many students are admitted into G&T for the 2018-19 school year, taking a look at those students by demographic, by ethnicity. We changed our assessment to the NNAT with the intention of admitting more students of color, more students of poverty, and more students speakers of another language, perhaps even reaching into our twice exceptional students. We do see an impact. We do see an opening of acceptance. We are gathering the data to quantify how much so, and while it may be a first step, we'll continue to monitor that moving forward. So we'll have that data for you on the 27th.
Yeah, we also met with Tom Pierre, who is the leader of the NAACP for this region, and we were sharing with him data for the last 3 to 5 years. And it's interesting, we've looked specifically middle school, high school, and our minority students being accepted into the advanced programs have gone up each year, which is a really good thing, and we want representation to reflect the district. So we'll have all of that information as well. We'll kind of look at, that might be an appropriate one for the first meeting in September, that parents will not be on vacation over the 27th around Labor Day, so that might be a better one for September. But we'll look at that all that data and put it out there.
Okay, thank you. Comments from the, yes. Yeah.
Mr. Rutsky, I know Mr. Prieur is also the chair of the AMISAD for this region, And can you just speak to the question about the Amistad?
Sure. He had asked us to gather our curriculum and how we're implementing the Amistad curriculum. What's really nice is he was pleased with what we're doing, but being that he is now the chairperson, it's going to be even a better relationship. He's going to provide us with some things that will help us. Now, we are sending teachers for the Amistad training, and we're looking at our curriculum. We're looking at how we have assessments set up around the Amistad, and we're going to work. We've set up a meeting a couple months from now to come back and revisit some of those things, and that's going to be one of those that we do. So we're going to continually stay in touch and work with Tom, and I, again, there's always room for improvement with the Amistad, but I think we're doing a pretty good job across the district.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further, Ms. Mordecai?
Yes, I just want to say thank you, Ms. Scales, for bringing up the question about the diversity fair. I pushed for the diversity fair for several years, so I'm glad we finally got it done. I even stopped by the Montclair Diversity Fair earlier in the spring to just take a look at how it was set up, and I've since asked Mr. Rutsky and the administration for an update on exactly, how the turnout was, and I stopped by for a little bit. But as a board member, you can't really interfere, so I literally just stopped in the doorway and looked to see how it was going, and spoke with the secretary, the desk who was doing the intake. So Mr. Rutsky will gather that data and bring an update to both the board and the public. So I'm glad it finally happened.
And the main reason we don't have it yet is we still have 5 open positions, and some of those individuals that attended the diversity fair are candidates for those positions. So our hiring will be done for the next board meeting, and then we'll have that information on the 20th.
Mr. Alper, anything? Mr. Schwarzbaum, anything? Mr. Robertson?
Couple things. One, Ms. Scales, I too was an advocate for that, and happy it happened, and looking forward to seeing the data and how we can continue it. It had been 15 years since we had done it. We have 1 or 2 teachers still in the district who came out of the last diversity fair, but we need to evaluate it and repeat it and make it even more successful. But thank you for mentioning that. Mr. Salinas, actually, I encourage you to run as well, okay? I'm allowed to, as a board member, encourage people to run. I'm allowed to even campaign for them as long as I'm upfront about a number of things, but that's okay. Number 2, I appreciate that as a father as well as an educator that you want this, want the best and the brightest in terms of our programs. That's also what motivated me to pursue this. So I applaud your efforts. When you're talking about the tax numbers that you mentioned, those are averages. So that's for the average home. So there's some homes that took a much bigger hit than the amounts that you mentioned. There are many homes that did. But those are averages. In terms of looking ahead, even when we use the reserves, as we dip into the reserves, by the way, that then also contributes to the amount, to the tax dollars again. Mr. Garcia, thank you so much for coming up to the mic, and hope to see you up there again. I apologize for what you've encountered in Washington. Thank you for making the board aware of it. And we should all go over and visit if we haven't recently. And but continue to bring things to our attention, hold us accountable. Let's get some stuff done. We don't get paid, by the way. This is free. Okay, just want to make sure. I thought you talked about how much. Oh, you advocate. Oh, that's good. That would be great. But thank you again. And safety and security. The other thing, when we do the audit in September, there's going to be, we've already done preliminary plans for each school, but we're going to be looking at more comprehensive plans for each school, and certainly security guards, how they're trained, what their capability is, and it's going to be all part of that. But thanks again. Barry, good friend, Barry. First of all, when you brought it to us, and thank you for the date. Yeah, it was the 25th or 26th, actually, of February. We immediately, within a week I'd say within a week or 2 weeks of that, initiated an internal investigation. It was when we, after doing the internal investigation, we then made the decision later on that in order to make sure that there was no even appearance or chance or perception of conflict, and that we were totally transparent, and that that the process was done correctly, we hired counsel. But that's about it. I'm sorry?
Okay. Counsel, go ahead.
Can we just keep it within? Let's not talk about that.
Okay, understood.
Please. That's correct.
Well, legal and personnel, we can't go into any details. And that's about it. That's it.
That's it?
That's it.
On the reports, I was remiss before. I want to congratulate our colleague, Ms. Mordecai. She is spotlighted in Leader magazine this month as the
Essex
County president.
President
So I don't know if you want to
for
speak
New
a few
Jersey
moments
School
on that.
Boards.
So,
Thank you.
And yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I am the Essex County School Board Association president, and this year, New Jersey School Board Association decided to spotlight each county president. So this month, I'm the spotlight, and they asked extensive questions about, various volunteer activities within the town and within the school district over the years, and different initiatives that I've brought to both the local district as well as all the other districts in Essex County. So it was pretty interesting. I actually haven't read the formal article as yet, even though they've done all the questioning and I've sent in the headshot. But it was a really nice privilege. And thank you. And it was a lot of hard work at the county. And Mr. Schwartzbaum is our Essex County delegate who also attends meetings. And as the county representative, I also get the opportunity to meet and mingle with some of the legislators from time to time, and that's why we were able to host Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver here last year to talk about additional funding. So there's a lot of little networking that happens, and unfortunately, I'm in Trenton about 10 to 15 times a year because of that position, but lots of driving, but it's well worth it, but it's a lot of driving. But thank you for your kind words. Thank you. I'm working for West Orange students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I need a motion now to move into executive session.
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Executive session.
For personnel matter,
Legal matters.
and no action will be taken.